The woman behind the most successful bakery in town had just been told she was the only person who could save the man she hated most. Her father. The same father who had abandoned her family 22 years earlier, and the doctor said she was his only kidney match. This is Grace's story. And the door she almost didn't open. Maple and Rye sat on a corner in a neighborhood that used to be run down before Grace made it worth visiting. Her name on the awning, in gold letters her mother had never gotten to see. That Tuesday, a man she almost didn't recognize walked in during the lunch rush, thinner than she remembered, moving like something inside him hurt. Grace's oldest employee, Ruth, quietly stepped between them and walked him to a back table before Grace had even fully processed who she was looking at. Grace stood frozen behind the counter for a long moment. Customers waiting, the espresso machine hissing behind her like the only thing in the room still functioning normally. She finally walked over. Up close, she could see it. Whatever was wrong with him wasn't something a bad year could explain. "I need a kidney," he said quietly, not quite meeting her eyes. "The doctors tested our family. You're the closest match they've found." Grace didn't say anything for a long moment. "I'm not asking you to say yes today," he added. "I know what I am to you. I just didn't have anyone else left to ask." Grace was 12 when her father gambled away the family's savings for the third and final time, then left one Tuesday morning without much of an explanation, leaving her mother to hold 2 jobs and a mortgage that didn't care whose fault anything was. She remembered the exact sound of the door closing that morning, quieter than she expected, like he was trying not to wake anyone up on his way out of their lives entirely. Her mother never talked badly about him in front of her, not once, which somehow made the whole thing harder to make sense of as a kid. Grace filled in the blanks herself, mostly with anger, because anger was easier to hold on to than confusion. Grace built this bakery, brick by brick, specifically so that nobody in her family would ever need a man like him again. Every recipe, every early morning, every loan she paid off ahead of schedule felt like a small, quiet argument she was winning against someone who wasn't even in the room to hear it. She hadn't spoken to her father in 19 years. She'd stopped being angry about it, mostly, or told herself she had. Anger takes energy to maintain, and Grace had redirected all of hers into flour, ovens, and a business that didn't fail the way he had. Ruth had worked for Grace's mother back when the bakery was still just a kitchen table and a dream. She knew exactly who this man was without being told, which was why she'd moved to intercept him before Grace even had to decide how to react in front of a room full of customers. Grace said no, not cruelly, but clearly, and walked back behind the counter like the conversation was finished. Her hands were shaking slightly as she pulled the next tray from the oven, and she hated that too. Ruth didn't say anything about it for 2 full days. On the 3rd day, refilling the display case, she finally spoke. "You don't have to help him," Ruth said, not looking up from the pastries. "I know," Grace said. "I'm not telling you to." Ruth straightened up, wiping her hands on her apron. "I'm just telling you what I've watched for 20 years. You built all of this to stop being his daughter, and you still haven't stopped being his daughter for 1 single day." Grace didn't have anything to say to that. She busied herself with a stack of receipts that didn't actually need sorting. Ruth went back to the pastries. "Your mother forgave him a long time before she died, you know. Different thing, whether or not she ever let him back in. She used to say forgiveness is a door. It only opens from your side." She didn't explain further. She just let it sit there between the trays of croissants, the way people who've earned the right to say hard things sometimes do. Grace went home that night and didn't sleep much. She kept turning her mother's sentence over, looking for the part where it let her off the hook. She couldn't find it, no matter how many times she rearranged the words in her head. Grace visited him a week later, mostly to end the conversation properly, she told herself. Not to reconsider anything. He was staying in a small rented room above a hardware shop, thinner in person than he'd looked in the bakery, the kind of thin that worried her despite everything. "I'm not going to pretend I was a good father," he said, before she'd even sat down. "I'm not here asking you to forget any of it. I just needed you to hear that I know exactly what I cost this family every single day since I left." Grace felt something crack slightly in her chest, and hated that it did. "That doesn't fix anything," she said. "No," he agreed quietly. "It doesn't." She almost left right then. Some part of her wanted the conversation to stay simple, wanted him to still be the villain she'd built her entire adult life in opposition to. A villain didn't get to sit quietly and agree with her. He didn't ask again about the surgery. He didn't ask for anything at all, actually. He just sat there, letting her be as angry as she needed to be, offering no defense, no excuse, nothing for her anger to push against. That somehow was harder to sit with than an excuse would have been. She left without answering him and sat in her car outside for almost 20 minutes before she could make herself drive away. Grace didn't decide that night. She didn't decide the next day either. She went through the motions at the bakery, smiling at customers, burning one batch of croissants she never burned, distracted in a way Ruth noticed but didn't comment on. She decided 3 days later, standing alone in the bakery after closing, staring at the gold letters on the awning through the front window from the inside. She realized, all at once, that she hadn't been protecting herself from her father for the last several years. She'd been protecting the version of herself that needed him to stay the villain, because that version never had to feel anything complicated about him again. It was easier to hate a villain than to grieve a flawed, ordinary man who happened to be her father. Ruth's voice came back to her. Forgiveness is a door. It only opens from your side. She finally understood what her mother had meant. It was never about whether he deserved it. It was about which side of that door Grace intended to keep living on, for however many years she had left to live on either side of it. She called the hospital the next morning and agreed to the testing. The surgery wasn't a reconciliation. They didn't become close. Grace didn't invite him to holidays or pretend 2 decades had been erased, but she stopped carrying him around like a weight in her chest everywhere she went, into every relationship, every quiet moment that used to fill up with old anger instead of peace. She kept the letters, though. 2 of them. The one Ruth had spoken out loud, and the one she wrote herself and never sent to her father. The one that finally said everything she'd needed to say out loud for 19 years, even if only to herself. Here's the door Ruth was talking about, the same one she gave Grace without either of them calling it a lesson at the time. You don't have to invite the person who hurt you back into your life to forgive them. Those are 2 completely different decisions, and only one of them is actually about you. So here's your challenge. Write the letter. Not to send it, just to finally say, on paper, everything you've been carrying silently for someone who may never even know it's there. Grace's father never fully understood how much that decision cost her. He didn't need to. The door was never for him, it was for her, and it had been sitting there unlocked, on her side, the entire time.